Hello and welcome to our webinar. This is HR Fireside Chat, Predictive Trends 2023. I'm Georgina from edays. For those of you who may not be familiar with who we are, edays is a leading provider of absence and leave management software. We serve hundreds of businesses of various sizes all around the world. We're here today to discuss trends from our white paper, which we released earlier this year, called What 100 HR Leaders Said About 2023. This was based on a survey that we did asking people in the HR industry what they think will be some of the biggest challenges and opportunities this year. So as people are joining, welcome everyone. I'd like to ask you to let us know in the chat what you think will be some of the biggest challenges or positives for HR this year. Let us know what role you work in or what industry your company operates in. Is there anything that you're particularly concerned about or perhaps feeling positive about? So the white paper focused on key topics, including absence and leave, employee wellbeing, and data and technology. And that's what we will be running through today, one by one. A few people also contributed to our white paper. They were Chris Mosley, who is our co-founder and Chief Technology Officer here at edays, author and burnout expert Kelly Swingler, and our very own People Director at edays, who is one of our guests today, Katrina Bennett. Hi. For anyone who hasn't read our white paper, there will be the opportunity to download it for free following this webinar, and you'll be redirected to a page to allow you to do that. So we have two guest speakers joining us today. I'm going to ask them to briefly introduce themselves in a second. I've already mentioned one of them, Katrina, and also Sally Bendtson, who is the founder of Limelight HR. I'm also joined by my colleague Jenny from edays, who I will hand over to in a moment, as she will be hosting the main portion of this webinar. So on to the intros then. Sally, would you like to say a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me on today. My background started down in London working in HR for a lot of big media firms, so places like BBC, Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, The Guardian. And I moved back to my hometown of Harrogate 6 years ago and set up Limelight HR, which was really to work with small, creative, progressive businesses that really care about their people. I want to find fun, interesting ways to engage them and help them feel supported and happy so that they do their best work, essentially.
Great, thank you, Sally. And Katrina, I'll ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, okay. Hello, everybody. As it's already been said, I'm the People Director here at edays, and this is my first role in a SaaS business, so software as a service. So that's really exciting and quite new for me, but my entire career has been in HR, in development and change, working with large organisations across the UK and Europe, but also working with SMEs and not-for-profit sector. I've worked in a variety of sectors as well, across engineering, healthcare, transport, and now in SaaS. So from that, you can probably deduce that I like variety and I have been around a long time. So I'm really passionate about people, the people agenda, and working within organisations to ensure that people are at the centre of that and are contributing to the success of organisations all around Europe and the world. So that's what I'm about. And I'm really excited to be here today, chatting with Sally and Jenny and the rest of the audience about people, HR, and what's going on in 2023.
Great, thank you both. Great to have you both with us today. Just looking at the chat, we've got a few messages coming in. A few people mentioning staff burnout and well-being as being a top priority for them, which is interesting. Also retention. Got quite a few people saying hello, where they're from. Nice to see you all. Keep your comments coming in. Just a bit of housekeeping then before we get started. This webinar will last for about 40 to 45 minutes. Please do send us questions into the chat as we go through. We'll keep an eye on this and answer some as we go along, and hopefully some at the end as well. And now I will hand you over to Jenny.
Thanks, Georgina. Great to join you all today. There was some great topics to come out of our white paper. It was a really interesting survey results. One of the main portions that came out were all to do with absence and leave, which is obviously really key for us here at edays. Katrina, was there anything that you found particularly interesting or surprising that came out of that?
I think for me, what it was really great to see was that, as we all know in HR, absence and absence management is really important. It is a cost to the business as well. So for us in HR or business managers to be able to understand that and maintain or reduce costs, and also think about our people, and really interesting that people are keen to talk about wellbeing and burnout, is that, if we are capturing and having conversations about absence, the more we know, the better we are able to make decisions and put in place interventions. So I think it's really important. It's a really important topic for HR and businesses for this year, for sure.
And Sally, was there anything that sort of surprised you, or anything that you think would particularly impact your kind of clients and your smaller customer base?
Yeah, I don't think it was so much surprising as very reflective of what I've seen with the small businesses that I've worked with. It's genuinely, I think, a real issue for businesses, small ones who don't have the right systems in place to track this kind of data. So they might have a sense that they've got some sickness absence issues, but they don't have any data that really reflects that. For them to fully understand what the picture looks like and what the reasoning is behind that. So it is something that I'm conscious of working with them, how they manage and understand that. It's definitely an issue. It has carried on from COVID. The connection to mental health is huge, and the fact that there's a lack of understanding at the granular level. You can understand sickness, but the reasoning behind that, how you would deal with that, is completely different depending on the type of sickness you're talking about. So if you actually haven't got the data behind that to understand the reason for the absence, it's really difficult to understand as a business. What do you put in place then to help with that absenteeism? So it wasn't so much surprising as, I think, reflective of the reality. And I think if businesses haven't really taken action to look at that, this should really be a prompt to say, actually, this very much reflects some of the issues we've been thinking of, and maybe we need to do more about it this year.
Yeah, and that definitely makes sense based on what we saw in the survey. I mean, you can see on the screen now, 25% don't have a clear understanding of their absence their team takes. So that's definitely in line with kind of what you're seeing. Another of the stats that came out was that 33% of businesses don't actually log mental health as an absence reason. Katrina, were you surprised by that? Did you think it would be higher, lower? What do you think that sort of reflects as the challenges that we're seeing?
I am actually quite surprised by that, because for me and my background and working with businesses and business managers, I would always be encouraging people to capture what the reasons are for absence, and to, as we've all said, we are seeing that increase in mental health being a reason why people are not attending work. So to not actually capture that, to give you that insight, and then to follow that through to really have those conversations with employees to really understand what's going on for them, really does hinder our ability to work with people to improve their health and well-being. So I think that was quite surprising. I would have hoped for more, but actually, it's such a spread. And as Sally said, smaller businesses, you don't always have the skills or the technology or the means to actually capture it. So sometimes it is just captured as an absence. So I think that is something that is really important, that, as Sally has also mentioned, that when we are capturing absence data, we need to capture it to a more granular level to really understand what's going on with our people. And I think that's an opportunity, as for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's really reflective as well of both individuals and managers not being potentially comfortable with that conversation. So it's easier to class absence as something else, either when you're ringing in, or if a manager has agreed maybe some time off with somebody, they might feel uncomfortable classing it in that way. They might want to feel that they're protecting the member of staff. There's all sorts of concerns if they're not confident about the subject matter, if they're not confident how to deal with it in the best way possible. And so people avoid certain things rather than facing them and dealing with them in the best way possible. And that's completely understandable on both sides. And if individuals and managers and business owners don't have a really clear, honest approach as to how they deal with these matters and how they put that support in place, it's difficult for people to know then how to manage it. But unless you're having those open and honest conversations, you really can't get to the bottom of it. So if people are having to class it as something else, I think it's reflective of some communication and honest conversations that need to take place in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, as you guys have said before, you know, it's all about the action that you can take from the data that's available to you. I mean, we can see that 44% said that they've seen an increase in mental health absences, even with those challenges around visibility and, you know, perhaps the taboo of the topic and things like that. Katrina, what do you think businesses can maybe do to kind of tackle that challenge? I know it's a pretty big one, but do you have any kind of advice or things that people could put in place to help their employees?
With regards to mental health? Yeah, mental wellbeing. I think the first thing is to actually have in place procedures or processes and being able to train your managers to have those open and honest conversations, because you've got to actually understand what's going on with the individual. And until you know that, you don't have the information to actually decide what's the proper intervention or action or support that's required. So I think there's something upstream about how you actually understand what that is and what that means for those individuals, and then thinking about what's the appropriate action or interventions excuse me, that are going to be appropriate for those individuals, and it will be and may be different for everybody. I think one of the things that also was covered in the white paper, which is really helpful, is the amount of benefits or support that organisations are actually introducing as well to employees. So giving access to employee assistance programs, getting those apps that support mental health or wellbeing, excuse me, and also thinking about things that you can do to support your employees, whether that's in edays. We have me days, which are days that we offer our employees to help them recharge and recover when they feel that things are not going well. I think there's also a part to play in upskilling our managers in how to have the conversations, how to identify and to support people in the best way. Sometimes that may be able to be done internally, but sometimes we may have to direct people to other places who are better qualified for that. So, thoughts.
Definitely. Thanks, Katrina. We're sticking with wellbeing actually, because that was a massive topic that came out of the white paper. You know, lots of people in the chat today clearly concerned about it as well. Burnout, sort of employee wellbeing and engagement were all massive topics. Sally, was there anything in particular around the wellbeing angle that was sort of interesting to you, or that you thought people should focus on more?
Yeah, I think, again, it's very reflective of the situation. And I suppose there was an element with COVID where we thought if we could help people through that and come out the other side, that we'd essentially all fall back into a more healthy, more relaxed way of living and let go of some of the stress and issues and strains that had happened through that. And what's become very apparent that it's potentially not got better and possibly even worse. People's resilience has been pushed to the limit. There's been the ongoing issues within the world, within finance, paying bills, all the additional stresses and strains. And it's taken its toll. And I think it's not enough to have looked at short term, what am I going to do to help people through this situation? It's what am I actually going to do longer term to ensure that on an ongoing basis, we've got everything in place to support people. Burnout, I think, is so clearly happening through all industries, all sides of business, right up to senior management level. And I think people are speaking about it much more openly, which is great, because if you can see senior leaders speak openly about the struggles that they face, it becomes more the norm to have those open conversations. But it really has got to be looking at the whole piece. And whilst we talk about mental health, which is obviously really important, there's so many other things that influence that I think businesses should and could be looking at. And it's not just about how do I help those people that are suffering, it's what do I put in place now to help create a healthy workforce so that I can maybe avoid some of that suffering and some of those struggles. And that covers everything from health, fitness, nutrition, finance, menopause. There's so many, men's health. There's so many different things that come into health and well-being. So starting with something like an EAP scheme is a brilliant way to start, but actually it's about doing so much more than that and making sure that people have the time to do those things and that you lead by example, and that as a business you implement regular, weekly, monthly approaches to help people look at that holistically, and that you get that feedback, to make sure that it is working for everybody. And what does well-being mean to people? What challenges do they face? And what do you put in place to help that as a business? I think it is an ongoing challenge, and I think it would be wrong to let it continue any further without actually deciding as a business, how are we going to tackle this long term?
Yeah, that's so true. And like you say, it's such a multifaceted issue, well-being. It's not just a one quick fix. There's all these elements that sort of come into it. And one of the big ones, like you say, is COVID. And something that COVID did was transform the sort of working landscape, in particular with hybrid working, which is something that Donna has actually asked about in the chat. The pitfalls, how to deal with them and things like that. Because there's things like isolation and stuff that it has an impact on for well-being. Katrina, how do you think that businesses can start to tackle that?
Yeah, it's a really topical topic, I think. And, I think organisations will approach it differently. I know there's a lot out there about the positives that employees have taken from it, in that it shorter commutes, no commutes, some days in the office, some days from home, gives people a better work-life balance, gives people more time. But the converse of that is also that, as an organisation, you lose some of that face-to-face collaboration, team working, and also sometimes people may feel isolated from colleagues or from human interaction. I know personally I like a bit of human interaction, and it's not always over a screen. So I think as organizations we need to understand what works for us as a business and what works for our people, and listen to our people and talk with our people about what works for them, and actually have those conversations to find out what can work. And it might not be the same for everybody. Everybody's different, and what people get from those different working arrangements will vary. And I think we've just got to be open to having those conversations and thinking about it creatively and being adaptable and flexible, but actually ultimately keeping our employees happy and able to work to the best of their ability in a changing workplace, I think.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because I remember when we went into COVID and people had to start working from home, it really challenged people, because they saw themselves as people that wanted to be part of a team. They wanted to be around people. And I spoke to a lot of employees and managers of small businesses where people really didn't want to be at home. And they were desperate to get back into the office. And I think it shows a very human side to all of us, that after a certain period of time, we all adapt to a new way of working. And I think very much so those that were struggling early on found a way to make it work for them, because we all do look to make our environment workable in one way or another. And people found that. And then we were saying, right, it's over, let's get back in the office. And people had learned this new habit, this new way of being. And so it was really difficult for them to let go of that and shift back into the office. I mean, it's as simple as too much noise in the office, so they didn't feel that they could have, team calls or things like, with too many distractions going on. They couldn't concentrate. It's the cost of the travel and all of these things. And I think it's really important to balance the needs of the individual, the needs of the business, but also sometimes the needs of the individual might need to be talked about further with them, because I've seen that most people, if you begin to retreat and you're suffering in some way with your mental health, you're probably unlikely to want to force yourself into an environment with people. And actually what I've seen is those people that we have managed to encourage back into the office have said that actually they're glad that that has happened, because they have really appreciated being able to mix with people, and actually it's taken them out of their home environment where they were missing that human experience and element and interaction. So it's really working with people, those that are struggling more so, to look at, okay, well, what would the positives be for you and how can we help you do that? And that's where the hybrid model, I think, works really well, to offer people both the interaction that they need and the community spirit and seeing people face to face, but also the time, you know, maybe on a day or 2 days a week where they get to do some of their work in silence. But for some people, it's as simple as having the freedom to go and walk their dog on their lunch break, or put their washing in their lunch break, so that they're not doing everything on an evening when they're trying to manage kids. You know, it's just helping people balance that whole personal life and work life. But I mean, it's a huge ongoing challenge. There's no easy way to do it, and it does depend on every business and then every individual. I definitely think there's a benefit to people having that face-to-face time.
Yeah,
and there are some some organisations where it's not possible to work from home, you know, and they've carried on working in the workplace in engineering, manufacturing, production, distribution, but they have carried on and they've found ways of working, and now maybe they're changing again. You know, and it is about that dialogue with your people and understanding and keeping that communication going. I really feel that's important. Hybrid model is great, but it won't necessarily work for all types of organisations.
Absolutely. And I think that also becomes what is there for people to encourage them to be in the office. How do you make your work environment a place that if people have to be there, absolutely, business needs essentially are what, you know, drives business decisions. But then what do you put in place to make that a good place to work? And that's where all the well-being and all the different initiatives come in, the community spirit, having things there, you know, team events, or celebrating birthdays, individual things, you know, just creating a great environment for people to go into, so that those that are going into work can see what a great business they're part of and can enjoy that element.
Yeah. Rav in the chat has actually echoed exactly what both of you are saying, you know, seeing a shift in that sort of hybrid working and needing to kind of promote equity and understanding individual needs. Whereas, you know, maybe at the minute there's a bit of a push towards that coming back to the office. I don't know if that kind of push has been born out of some of the challenges that we see with hybrid working, which is potentially, you know, presenteeism, and are people getting more burnt out from that blur between home and work life? Katrina, what do you think about that?
I think that's definitely something that we need to explore and understand if we feel that is happening with our people. I know certainly from edays perspective, what we want is we operate a hybrid model, and we want to see people coming in when it makes a difference, not just for their well-being, but also for the business. So we've got projects that we need cross teams working on. Sometimes it's great to have those kickoffs in person. We get you know, collaboration and engagement, and it builds those relationships. So that's really important. I think that we do things that, as Sally said, actually encourage people to want to work in the office when it's relevant to, you know, it's not forcing it for the sake of it, because that actually just detracts from people's well-being and engagement in the business. And we all know if you've got engaged employees, you know, they're going to be performing. That's really going to help business be a success. So I think it's about tailoring the approach.
Yeah, it's so true what you said there about, you know, it being meaningful, people coming in, because otherwise it just becomes an element of presenteeism. I want to see them at their desk, but then they sit there and don't interact with somebody all day. Or I've seen businesses where they encourage people to come in, and then people make the 1 hour journey into the office and there's only 2 other people there. it needs to have some kind of real structured approach to it on what's your reasoning for it and how's it going to work and what's your approach, and then how do you communicate that to everybody so that you don't get one person in one day on their own and then everybody else in the next day. If you're going to encourage it, then have a structured approach to why you're encouraging it and how you're going to make it work.
Absolutely agree.
Definitely. On that then, on the topic of presenteeism, Sally, is that something that you're seeing with the businesses that you work with? Is that a challenge that's sort of coming up quite a lot outside of the realms of hybrid working? Are businesses struggling with that?
I think presenteeism has always been an issue for managers and businesses, and it depends what you value or how you measure success and achievements within an individual or a team, whether you base that on outcomes and delivery or whether you base it on the number of hours that somebody works and how often you see them at their desk. And it's really important, I think, to focus on the outcomes. I think where managers want people back at their desks because then they feel comfortable that they know they're working, it suggests actually the issue is trust and not the hybrid working model or home working versus being in the office. If there's a trust issue that you feel that people working from home aren't working, it's a much bigger issue that needs to be tackled in a completely different way, and just forcing people into the office won't address that.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, both of you. We'll move on then, because there's obviously a lot to tackle in the employee wellbeing realm. But another big topic we saw in the white paper was data and technology. Coming to you first, Katrina, was there anything in there that surprised you or that you found particularly interesting?
I think the whole area of people data and how you get it, what you do with it when you've got it, have you ever got enough, and doing something meaningful from it is always a real hot topic for me personally, but for all businesses. I think what's really encouraging there is that 64% say that people have got the skills with data and technology. Fantastic. There's clearly a number of people out there I know from the survey who are saying that they're not tech savvy, they don't want to be tech savvy, but they do want some quality data, and to get those insights that helps them make the right decisions or have further conversations. So I think this is really, really interesting, and to use a Sally phrase, probably reflective of where we're at and what we see. But I think, 25% plus not having a clear understanding of the absence that their teams take. That's just something that we've got to work on as organisations. We need to know this if we're going to make a difference and make things happen, change for the positive. So data and technology for me is really critical. And I think Kelly said it in the white paper, as Kelly Swingler said in the white paper, data and people data is critical for us as we move forward. Certainly 2023, really important.
Definitely. And Sally, you said earlier one of the challenges that obviously you see with the smaller businesses is that they might not have as much data available to them. They might not have the platforms or the resource. Is there anything in particular that comes off the back of that you're finding challenging for businesses at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think even as simple as the time that is spent managing people and people data without a system, that in itself, the time you can save just through having a system is a massive bonus. I think a lot of small businesses think, oh, I don't need to get a system until I'm at a certain number of people. There are still companies with 80 plus people who don't have a system and they still rely on Excel spreadsheets. I mean, I wouldn't want that job, trying to manage all of that. And I think it becomes where the data essentially is only good as the people managing it. And if you've got different teams, different managers, different individuals approaching processes in slightly different ways, not updating certain spreadsheets or elements, you're just never going to have something consistent across the whole business. And therefore, what you do have is completely meaningless. And I think actually when you're a small business, it's the perfect opportunity to get systems and data in place, because actually before it's become too unwieldy. When it's small enough, you can build it exactly how you need it. You can learn how to use it in the way that you want it. And then as your business grows, the data and the systems grow with you. I think most small businesses would use some form of data and technology and systems in other areas of their business, whether that's to do with marketing or to do with their products. So using it for their people is just as essential. I think the other thing is they may have access to data through those systems, but not use it because there's nobody within the business that's really responsible for doing anything with that. So I think it's really important to both have the systems, but also have somebody who's accountable for using those systems, ensuring that they're up to date, ensuring that they're managed correctly, and that data is used from it. I suppose another point is that I've seen a lot of management teams potentially ask for data and reports on a regular basis. It could be monthly or quarterly, but what is it that they are then going to do with that data? Because it's either a tick box exercise or it's actually used to strategically change something within the business. And as a tick box exercise, it really is then just another admin function that's taking time and isn't really helping the business in terms of efficiency. So I think if you're going to have the systems in place and access to the data, make sure you do something meaningful with it and learn from it. And quite often that means you might get a picture of a sort of a big picture view of potential issues or areas to address. But what you'll need to do is follow up that data with face-to-face conversations with teams, with individuals, to understand what is underlying so that you can put things into place rather than just reading the data and making any assumptions about what you want to put into place.
Yeah. I would absolutely agree with what you've just said there, Sally. I think for a number of organisations that the concern might be, what's the return on that investment in automating or some technology? And it's not, the return is not just on speeding up the amount of admin. It's actually also about the reporting that you get from that, and particularly the insights that you get from that, whether that is just telling you what's happening in a clear way, or enabling you to predict for the future those trends. And that's got to be of value to businesses, to add value to the decision making, the discussions, the actions that are taken. And I think the other thing about data and technology is that if you're engaging the employee in that process as well, so their experience of the technology is actually giving them information or making the process of booking a holiday or the process of logging and seeing their absences, you're engaging them in the process. That's maintaining those communications as well. So the business has a good and effective experience, but the employee does as well. And I think that's really important. We shouldn't lose sight that employees are part of this as well. It's their data.
Yeah, definitely. It's so true what you've both said. You know, it's all about having that data and then doing something meaningful with it. Along the lines of how valuable that data is then, how valuable do you think it is for businesses to invest in their data, whether that be through a platform or a tool, or even to invest in training people better? You know, we can see from that first stat on screen that although that sounds quite good, that 64% feel they have the right skills, that leaves 36% who feel that they don't. Sally, what do you think about that?
I think it's really important to invest. And I think you do have to invest in both the system, the implementation, and the training, because having the implementation or the system without the training, really, I'm sure you'll get something out of it, but you're really limiting what you're going to achieve through having it. So making sure that anybody, both from an employee point of view or a manager point of view or kind of senior administrator of the system, everybody needs to have the full training to understand how to use that system in the best way possible. One, so that they don't misuse it and end up with, you know, like you talked about, Katrina, there's, you know, people's personal information here. So it's really important that you manage that very carefully. but also that you do something proactive with it. So all the right people need the right training. I think it came out in the report that a lot of HR people don't feel that they've got the right or necessary training within data. And I've seen that over a number of years. I think it's an ongoing issue for HR people. What data should I have and what should I do with it? So if that's something that has been an ongoing trend within the industry, there really needs to be a push to do something about it, because we can all see the value of it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be using data in all other areas to assess, are our customer or our clients happy with what we're doing? What improvements do they want? How do we make our product better? What are the next industry changes? What are the new technologies we need to look at? Why would we do that for our clients and our customers, but not do it for our staff? So I think you need to invest internally in those kind of systems and make sure that people are able to use them to their best advantage.
Yeah, I would endorse that absolutely. Of course, it is about usability, accessibility for everybody, whether that be business managers, the employees, or HR, who are often the people that are using it, collating it. But I think also when you're investing in technology or automation, whatever that looks like for your organisation or the solution that you choose, is about taking the time up front to be very clear what it is you want from the system. What do you want it to tell you, to set up regular reports, for example, or to, have insightful reports, information presented in a way that is meaningful for your organisation, so that you can then move to do something with it. I think that's really important when people are thinking about what they want, how they're going to manage their data.
Yeah, and Christelle in the chat has echoed what you've both said as well, that there's unfortunately a bit of a lack of capability or technical skills maybe within the industry, and that it's absolutely crucial to people decision making. So thanks for your comment, Christelle. Just outside of the topics that we've already covered then, because we're nearly at the end of today's session, what other challenges do you think are big in the industry right now? What do you think HR is going to be facing this year? Katrina, we'll come to you first.
Yeah, I think the sort of the wider economic landscape that we are all in, we've gone through the pandemic and now we're into recession, probably in the UK. We've got economic, energy crisis, inflation, organisations having to think about efficiencies, downturns in revenue, higher operating costs, and employees, where the labour market was very favourable, very transferable, and people were moving to organisations are restructuring. Do people move? Don't they move? I think there's a lot going on. And for me, HR has got to continue to adapt and navigate through those challenges to ensure that the people agenda and people's wellbeing and engagement in organisations is being focused on, and we are doing what we can to ensure that our people are happy working, and that we're doing the best we can for them. Sometimes with constrained budgets, we're either going to be doing the same with less or more with less, maybe. So, and HR is really central to that, to keeping the employee agenda forefront in the decisions that we make and how we continue to focus on the things we've been talking here today: well-being, engagement, absence.
Definitely. Thanks, Katrina. And what do you think, Sally? What do you think the small business challenges are for this year?
I absolutely agree with Katrina. Those are huge challenges, and they can't be taken lightly. I think I've done a number of surveys in a number of companies, and one of the clear things that always comes out is communication. And at a point where both people and businesses are under stress, that can be the point at which relationships become fractured. And I think it's really important for businesses to recognise that up front and put everything in place that they can to stop that from happening. And that can be done through communication. So I think it needs to be planned out. How am I going to do this? How am I going to keep those communication lines open? How am I going to make sure that we are checking in with people regularly to see how they are? not just on a personal level, but from a business level, because actually if you need to retain your staff and you're not having conversations with them to understand how they're feeling and whether the job is still providing them what they need, you're at risk of losing them. So I think communication and building true relationships with people is really important this year. It's not just a quick check-in, it's genuinely having building a relationship with somebody and understanding what's going on for them. And I think the other thing is around recruitment still, obviously, and that leads into the burnout issue, because actually if you've got problems recruiting and you've got a small team trying to do as much as they were doing when they had an extra couple of people, they are under ongoing stress levels. That needs to A, be recognised, and B, alternative solutions need to be found, and people might need to start thinking of more creative ways to manage their work than just going down the traditional route that they always have. And I think this is the year to start thinking outside of the box to make sure there aren't individuals that are under too much pressure because you're struggling to recruit.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sally. Thanks, both of you. We're pretty much out of time for today. So I'm going to hand back to Georgina just to wrap things up.
Thank you all. That was really interesting and insightful. Thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Just to round off, I'd like to say a big thank you to Sally and Katrina for joining us today. You can find out more about Sally's company at limelight.hr.co.uk. And you can find her on LinkedIn as well if you'd like to give her a follow. And likewise, Katrina is on LinkedIn. I'm sure she'd love to hear from you if you want to connect with her. If you'd like to find out more information about how edays absence management software can help with some of the topics that we've talked about today, please do visit our website, e-days.com, where you can learn more about us and book a free personalised demo. As I mentioned, once this webinar has finished, you'll be redirected to a page where you can download our white paper for free. So please feel free to do that. And thank you to everyone who's joined us today, and we hope to see you again in a future webinar. Thank you.